My grandfather, on my mother's side of the family, was a World War II veteran. He fought in the Pacific Theater and he was in the Army. And he died when I was young, so I didn't get to really get to know him as well as I would have liked to and the way I wish I could have. But he was always very withdrawn, and mom would oftentimes tell myself and my brother to leave grandpa alone. He's not in a good mood today. And I never understood. I was too young, so I never understood why he was the way he was. And now, as an adult, and after I learned about World War II, and in particular the Pacific Theater, I came to understand why he was the way he was. Because the fighting in the Pacific Theater of World War II was some of the most brutal and just terrifying experiences that a person could ever deal with. And this all started, more people are familiar with the European theater in World War II with Hitler and Germany and the Soviet Union and Great Britain and that part of the war. But a lot of people are not as familiar with the Pacific Theater. And of course, this started with just about everyone's heard of the attack on Pearl Harbor, which occurred December 7th, 1941. And that is what brought the United States into World War II. And this had been building up all through for years before the actual attack. And it was a surprise attack, but there were indicators beforehand. And this was all diplomatic relations had fallen apart with Japan, in great part due to their expansionist policies, especially into China, mostly for natural resources. And that's kind of what drug the United States into the war. And the attack on Pearl Harbor was a surprise attack, but we kind of knew as early as November 27th there were bulletins issued that said that Japan was most likely about to declare war and an attack was probably imminent, but they didn't know where. So the attack, of course, it destroyed 2 battleships, damaged 3 cruisers, 3 destroyers, and was responsible for the deaths of 2,300 Americans. It was a day that will, as they say, live in infamy forever. And then that drug us into World War II, and then the next major battle was Guadalcanal. My grandfather was actually a combat infantryman on Guadalcanal, and it was a brutal experience for everyone involved. It started in August of 1942, and the fighting continued until February of 1943. It was a land, sea, and air battle that lasted for roughly 6 months. And it was a turning point in the war for the Allies, because when the Americans captured Guadalcanal, the airstrip was the key component of the island, and that allowed bomber missions and flights to take off from Guadalcanal, and then that began the island hopping campaign to the Gilbert Islands, then the Marianas Islands, and on, all the way to the doorstep of Japan. It cost 4,200 American lives, and the Japanese casualties were 24,000 out of the 31,000 defenders. And then the island hopping campaign continued, and then the next battle that I would like to discuss was the Battle of Iwo Jima, which occurred from, actually today, February 19th, is the 76th anniversary of the battle. It lasted for 5 weeks, February 19th, 1945 until March 26th, 1945, and cost 7,000 U.S. Marine lives to take that island. and all but 200 of the Japanese defenders, of the 21,000 Japanese defenders of the island, only 200 survived. So that just shows you the brutality and the savagery of the fighting in the Pacific theater in World War II. And the irony is, the island was captured for strategic bombing of the Japanese home islands, and it was never even used for that purpose. So it was a terrible battle, and a lot of men died for, you hate to say nothing, but it was never even used as any significant, in any significant way during the war. That just gives you a little taste of the history of the Pacific theater in World War II and the sacrifices that our veterans made. Thank you.